Ellen DeGeneres cracked a joke on live TV, expecting laughs, but Jasmine Crockett's shocking response left her speechless and the audience stunned. It started with a phone call no one expected. Wednesday, just after 2:00 p.m., Jasmine's comms director, Andre, stepped into her office, phone in hand, eyes sharp. "They want you on the Ellen Show," he said. "Next week. Surprise guest spot for a Women in Leadership episode." Jasmine didn't look up right away. She was marking up notes on a housing equity bill she'd been working for weeks. "Ellen?" she said finally, raising an eyebrow. "Interesting. Not skeptical? Not excited? Just curious." On paper, it made sense. A high-profile congresswoman making headlines for her poise and precision. Ellen's team probably saw a perfect ratings combo. Politics, empowerment, and a little edge. Something to balance the PR noise swirling around Ellen's recent controversies. A reset moment. A power guest. But behind the glossy invitation was something else. Something that made Andre uneasy. He flipped through the briefing email, lips tightening. They're keeping it vague. No real rundown. Just, it'll be warm and empowering, but they're asking if you'll be okay with some surprises. Jasmine looked up then, slowly. "Surprises?" "Yeah." She pushed her chair back, not annoyed, just aware. "I don't do ambush empowerment," she said. "We go on our terms or not at all." Her team spent the next 24 hours pressing for clarity. The Ellen producers kept it light reassurances, grins over Zoom, the usual tone. This is a celebration, not an interrogation. But Jasmine's gut didn't buy it. She wasn't naive. She knew how these moments worked. How a woman like her sharp, black, unflinching got packaged and clipped. They wanted her story. But stories get twisted. Still, she said yes. Not because she trusted the setup, because she trusted herself. If they were hoping for fireworks, she'd bring a mirror instead. Let America watch what happens when you try to tame clarity with charm. The booking was confirmed by Friday. The team prepped travel, wardrobe, and talking points. But Jasmine just kept reviewing her notes. Not for Ellen. For whatever the moment demanded. The applause was automatic. That studio clapped the kind that bursts on cue, polished and enthusiastic, like muscle memory wearing lip gloss. Ellen stood center stage, grinning wide. The cameras cut. The lights softened just a touch. "Please welcome to the show, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett." Jasmine stepped out like she'd done it 100 times. Black heels, emerald blazer, gaze steady. She walked like the air wasn't even touching her. Poised, precise shoulders back, breath low, presence turned all the way up. The crowd clapped louder. Ellen met her halfway with open arms. A hug that looked friendly, but felt studied. "I am so excited you're here," Ellen beamed. Jasmine smiled. Warm, measured. "Thanks for having me." They sat. The couch, the table, the mugs that no one actually drinks from. The crowd quieted. Ellen started easy. "You've been making a lot of headlines lately. Standing your ground, calling people out, doing the Lord's work in a pantsuit." Laughter. Jasmine smirked politely. The next few minutes were glossy. Safe anecdotes, quick sound bites. Jasmine answered with grace, but Ellen was steering hard toward the image, not the person. "You're so confident," Ellen said with a chuckle. "I watch you and think, now that's someone you don't want to argue with." The crowd laughed again, but Jasmine didn't, because something in Ellen's tone wasn't quite admiration. It was amusement dressed in compliments. It was the way you talk about someone you don't fully believe belongs in the room but say you do. Underneath the banter was a current. Something sharp. Something rehearsed. Ellen leaned in, smile still bright. "We're going to have fun today." Jasmine gave nothing but a nod. Inside, her posture changed. Not on the outsidino one would see it. But her breath shifted. Her focus tightened. This wasn't just a visit. This was a setup. And Jasmine Crockett didn't do setups. She did truth. With or without permission. And America? It was about to see the difference. It started small. Like it always does. Wrapped in laughter, dipped in sugar, tossed to the crowd like confetti. Ellen leaned back on the couch, holding one of her infamous blue cards. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett," she read with a grin, "also known as the feisty fighter from Texas." Laughter. Light clapping. One person in the front row whooped. Jasmine tilted her head slightly. The kind of tilt that says, "I heard that the way you said it, not just what you said." But she smiled, cool and effortless. "I prefer just Jasmine," she said. "But I'll take from Texas." Ellen laughed. "Oh, come on, you have to admit, you're a little spunky. Intense. I mean, if there's a fire in the room, you're either starting it or putting it out." The crowd roared. Another punchline. Another label. Spunky. Feisty. Intense. The trifecta. Jasmine kept her posture easy, but inside, she was sorting it, lining it up next to all the other words they use when they don't want to say too much. Too opinionated, too loud, too real. She didn't flinch. Didn't push back. Not yet. Instead, she gave them clarity dressed as charm. "I try to match the temperature of the room," she said with a soft smile. "Some rooms just run cold." A few people laughed, unsure if they were supposed to. Ellen nodded like she was listening, but her eyes were scanning the audience, waiting for her next opening. Jasmine watched it unfold, one phrase at a time, words meant to disarm her, shrink her down just enough to fit the segment. Not praise, not curiosity. Control. Because when you call someone feisty, you give yourself permission not to take them seriously. When you call someone intense, you imply they're too much. And when you laugh as you do it, you dare them to look like they can't take a joke. The audience laughed again, but Jasmine didn't. She just took another sip of water, letting the space between them stretch. She knew this pattern, and she was done playing along. It slipped out like a whisper with teeth, packaged as humor, delivered like routine. And when Ellen said it, she didn't blink. "You're so fired up all the time," she grinned, turning slightly to the crowd. "You'd think someone dragged you here from Africa this morning." Laughter, quick and bright, reflexive. Then it stuttered, hiccuped, died. A beat of silence wrapped the room, the kind that makes you suddenly aware of every chair creak and shoe scuff in the room. Jasmine didn't move at first. She just blinked. Once. Then again. Slow and steady. The camera cut to Ellen still, smiling, but now blinking a little too fast. The crowd froze in that half space between confusion and discomfort. A few people looked around as if to ask, "Did she just say that?" She did, and Jasmine heard every layer of it. Not just the words, but the shrug behind them, the centuries buried in them. The way it came dressed as comedy but carried the weight of something much older, much heavier. She didn't raise her voice, didn't shift in her seat. Just let the silence do what it does when truth shows up uninvited. She let it land, and it did. Ellen, still unaware of just how deep the crack had gone, added, "I meant you've got energy, passion, it's a compliment." But Jasmine didn't respond. Because when you've spent your life hearing phrases like that coated in laughter, laced with distance, you learn that responding too quickly makes you the problem. So instead, she waited. Not for permission, for precision. The air in the studio had changed. No more polite giggles. No more crowd-pleasing claps. Just a moment bare, unfiltered, where everyone had to decide what they really heard. And Jasmine? She wasn't hurt. She was calculating. Because now, the whole country was listening. And the next sentence she spoke would do more than clap back. It would carve the line between entertainment and exposure. The camera didn't cut away. It lingered. Too long. Just long enough to catch the moment unravel. The studio air turned thick, like static before a storm. Ellen looked out at the audience, blinking fast. Someone coughed. Another person let out a half laugh, then swallowed it. No one knew what to do. Not the audience. Not the band. Not even Ellen, who'd built her entire career on knowing exactly how to pivot. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly, waving her hand with a nervous chuckle. "You know I love everyone." She said it with that sing-song tone people use when they're more afraid of the fallout than the truth. The kind of tone that says, "Don't make this a thing." But it was already a thing. It had already become a thing. Because the words had landed. Not just on Jasmine, but on every person watching who had ever been told they were too much, too loud, too other. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just leaned forward slightly. A quiet move, but somehow it filled the space. Her body didn't shift much, but her presence did. It spread, settled into every camera lens, wrapped around every person in the room like a new gravity. Ellen's smile twitched. You could see her calculating, looking for a way to rewind the moment. But Jasmine wasn't giving her one. Because Jasmine knew the difference between a misstep and a mask. And right now, Ellen's mask was slipping. The crowd didn't clap, didn't gasp. They just froze. waiting, waiting to see what Jasmine would do, whether she'd brush it off or set the room on fire. She did neither. She just breathed and let the silence stretch, because sometimes the sharpest thing you can do is let the world sit in what it tried to laugh through. 8 seconds. That's how long she said nothing. Not a word, not a sigh, not a sound, just silence. It wrapped the room like a wire pulled tight. You could hear the hum of the lights overhead. A camera operator shifted his stance. One of the producers mouthed cut to someone off stage. But no one moved, because Jasmine hadn't moved. And whatever she was about to say, they all knew it was going to matter. Ellen's smile held for 3 of those seconds. Then it twitched again, collapsed just slightly at the corners. Her fingers tapped the cue cards like a nervous tell. But she said nothing more. She couldn't, because this was no longer her moment. Jasmine slowly turned her head. Not to the cameras, not to the crowd, to Ellen. And then she spoke. Not loud, not angry, just real. Real in a way that cut through the fake plants in the studio polish. You know, she began, her voice calm and steady. That joke you made, that kind of thing doesn't shock me. What shocks me is how many people still expect me to smile through it. You could feel the words land, like weight dropping onto the chest of the room. Ellen didn't interrupt. She couldn't. The audience sat still. Even the band didn't breathe. Jasmine kept going slow, measured, relentless. There's always a joke, a wink, a laugh just loud enough to deflect, but not loud enough to be called out. And when I don't laugh along, suddenly I'm the problem. She leaned back, not to relax, to let it echo. And it did, because she wasn't defending herself. She was holding up a mirror and letting the world decide if it was ready to look. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to, because what she was about to say didn't require volume-only truth. You don't get to disguise that as humor, she said. Her tone was razor-sharp, but smooth, steel wrapped in velvet. I've been in rooms like this my whole life, where the jokes come with a wink and a slap on the back. And if I don't laugh, I'm too sensitive. The audience froze. Even the laughter that had been lingering in their throats curdled. Jasmine turned slightly, addressing not just Ellen, but the room. Everyone. Every camera. Every person watching now or later. There's a difference between a joke and a jab, she said. A joke invites everyone in. A jab is meant to remind someone where you think they belong. Silence. You could feel it turning. See, when you say something like, dragged here from Africa, it's not just outdated. It's not just careless. It carries history. It carries weight. And pretending it's just funny. She paused, blinked slowly. That's not humor. That's erasure. Ellen didn't respond. She was sitting still now. No cue cards. No grinning. Just blinking. Just watching. And I'm not here for that, Jasmine said. Not defiant. Not angry. Just clear. A single person clapped. Then another. Then 3 more. The room didn't erupt, it cracked. Some stunned. Some nodding slowly. Some looking away like they'd been caught watching something too real. Because it wasn't just about what was said. It was about who finally said something back. And Jasmine wasn't performing. She was correcting. Not with rage. With restraint. And that made it land harder than any outburst ever could. Ellen shifted in her seat, face flushed. But Jasmine didn't look at her anymore. She was already talking to the rest of the world. And the world, whether it liked it or not, was listening now. The show cut to commercial. The applause light flicked on. People clapped, but it felt forced, scattered. Like the room wasn't sure what it had just witnessed. Backstage, the crew moved like they were underwater. No jokes. No banter in headsets. Just silence. Then someone whispered, "Did you hear what she just said?" A camera tech 23, second year on the job, walked over to the monitor playback station, hit rewind, watched the exchange, watched it again, and then pulled out his phone. The upload wasn't planned. It wasn't authorized. It was a gut decision. He clipped the moment raw, unedited, unscripted. Jasmine's words. Ellen's face. The shift in the room you could feel through the screen. By the time the show's closing credits rolled, the clip had hit Twitter. Captioned simply, "She didn't yell. She didn't flinch. She just told the truth." Crockett claps back. It caught like dry grass on fire. 50 views. Then 200K. Then a million. TikTok got it next: duets, reactions, subtitles, breakdowns. Someone slowed the video and overlaid Nina Simone vocals. Another stitched it with historical clips of civil rights hearings. The internet wasn't just reacting. It was witnessing. By midnight, celebrities chimed in. Kerry Washington. The poise, the clarity, the grace. Trevor Noah. That wasn't a clapback. That was a correction, and the country needed it. Even Ava DuVernay posted the full transcript with the words, "No rewrite necessary." But it didn't stop with praise. Former Ellen guests began speaking out. Not all at once, just a few. At first. One tweeted, "I remember being told to lighten up too. Thought I was overreacting. Watching Jasmine tonight reminded me I wasn't." What Jasmine had said on stage was barely 5 minutes long. But by morning, it had shifted a conversation that had gone untouched for too long. Because it wasn't just about Ellen anymore. It was about what passes as friendly. When power hides behind a smile. By sunrise, Ellen's PR machine was already groaning to life. Emails flew. Phones rang. Producers scrambled down hallways, barking strategy in hushed voices. Someone drafted a statement in 15 minutes. It went live on Ellen's official page by 3 a.m. sharp. If my words were misunderstood or caused offense, I regret that. I've always stood for kindness, inclusion, and respect. Polite. Vague. Weightless. The kind of apology that sounds like an empty room echoing itself. It didn't mention Jasmine by name. Didn't mention the joke. Didn't take responsibility. Just regret if someone took it the wrong way. The internet saw through it instantly. Comments flooded in. Thousands. This isn't accountability. This is brand protection. Kindness without clarity is still harm. You knew what you said. We all heard it. Screenshots of the apology were reposted with red circles and arrows, breaking it down like a crime scene. Even casual viewers who hadn't seen the clip yet started asking, "What did Ellen do?" By noon, major outlets picked up the story. Variety, BuzzFeed, Rolling Stone. Not just headlines about what was said, but headlines about what wasn't. Old controversies resurfaced. Former staff interviews. That smiling mask Ellen wore on camera was starting to crack in public. Her team scrambled again. One suggested a second apology. Another pushed for a sit-down interview. But the damage was already done. Because this time, the narrative wasn't in their hands. It was in Jasmine's. And Jasmine hadn't said a word. That silence? It wasn't passive. It was powerful. And everyone could feel it closing in like a drumbeat. Ellen had said enough. And now, the country was waiting to hear what Jasmine would say next. They came fast. Emails, phone calls, DMs. CNN wanted a live interview. The New York Times asked for an op-ed. Every news outlet from The View to Democracy Now! Wanted her on the next episode. But Jasmine said nothing. Not a word. Not on Instagram. Not on Twitter. Not even a repost of the viral clip. Her office issued one line to the press. The Congresswoman has no comment at this time. And then silence. Not out of avoidance. Not out of fear. But by choice. Because Jasmine knew how this worked. She'd seen it before. When a black woman speaks too soon, she's called emotional. When she waits, she's called calculated. So Jasmine waited. But not idly. While the headlines screamed her name, she sat in her Dallas office with the blinds half drawn. The calls buzzed. Her staff filtered what they could. Andre hovered near the door, phone practically glued to his hand. "You sure you don't want to respond?" he asked once quietly. Jasmine didn't look up. "I'm writing," she said. Her voice was low, controlled. And she was. Not a statement. Not a quote. Something else. Her notepad filled slowly. No ghostwriters. No PR team drafting bullet points. Just her thoughts, raw and unfiltered, scribbled in tight loops and long lines. Because this wasn't just about Ellen. This wasn't just about a joke. It was about every time she'd been told to calm down when she was calm. Every meeting where she was interrupted but expected to smile. Every debate where her restraint was weaponized against her. She wasn't preparing a response. She was preparing a reckoning. And when she finally spoke, it wouldn't be to trend. It would be to teach. The podium wasn't even real. Just a folding table in a small civic center in South Dallas. No banners, no branded backdrop, No teleprompter. Just Jasmine. A mic, a navy suit, and a folder she barely opened. Reporters packed the room, local, national, international. Cameras lined the back wall, cords snaking through chairs. Everyone waiting to hear what she would say, how she would say it, and if she would go for the throat. She didn't. She went for the truth. "Let's get something clear," Jasmine began. Her voice steady, measured. No theatrics. Just presence. This isn't about a joke. This is about a pattern. A culture. A comfort some people have with using coded language to remind folks like me that we're only conditionally welcome. A murmur rolled through the crowd, then stillness. Jasmine didn't blink. Didn't soften her voice. She spoke like she was reading from stone. Words like spicy, angry, aggressive, those aren't compliments. They're control mechanisms. They're how you dismiss someone while pretending to admire them. And I've had enough. She paused, looked straight into the cameras. I've worked too hard, bled too much into this job, to be laughed off like a caricature on national TV. And let me be clear, this is not about ego. It's about representation. It's about respect. You could feel the air shift. Reporters leaned in. Viewers at home leaned forward. "This moment," she said, "is bigger than Ellen. It's about how we allow certain people to get comfortable enough to say things that were never okay, and then blame us for not laughing." And then she closed the folder, stepped forward, and delivered the line no one would forget. "I wasn't dragged from Africa. I was built by America, and I'm not going anywhere." The room broke. Gasps. Applause. Even a few stunned tears from people who hadn't realized they needed to hear that until she said it. She stepped down, didn't take questions, didn't pose, just left, like she had work to do. Because she did. It didn't just go viral. It detonated. The speech was online within 30 minutes raw footage. Subtitles added by strangers who wanted it accessible faster than the networks could catch up. Clips circulated on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram Reels. But it wasn't just the share count. It was the echo. Professors paused lectures to play it. Clips made their way into AP government classes and sociology discussions. Youth organizers added it to PowerPoint decks for community events. One teacher in Baltimore printed the transcript and asked her students, "What does it mean to belong in a place that's always tested your worth?" And they answered, "Honestly." Activists quoted Jasmine at protests. Poets wrote stanzas around her line. Churches replayed it during Sunday service. Daytime TV scrambled. Talk show hosts who had once played the same game Ellen did now issued quiet apologies on air. Mea culpas wrapped in humility. "We've all said things we shouldn't have. We can do better. We must do better." Some meant it. Others just didn't want to be next. And Ellen? She canceled her next taping. No live audience. No monologue. No dancing. Her brand didn't collapse, but it fractured, visibly. The image of kindness and laughter, of safe, playful rebellion, it cracked under the weight of the truth Jasmine had handed her in front of millions. Because the joke hadn't just fallen flat. It had revealed something. And once the curtain is pulled back, you don't clap the same way again. The culture had shifted, not because Jasmine yelled, not because she humiliated anyone, because she told the truth and left the room standing taller than she entered. It started as whispers, a few anonymous tweets, a comment under a viral post, a former production assistant who simply wrote, "Y'all just seeing now what some of us lived through for years." Then it grew, fast. Former Ellen Show staffers came forward, names attached this time. Stories of toxic work environments, casual microaggressions, and smiles that snapped shut the moment the cameras did. A writer recalled being told to tone down the activism when pitching a segment on Indigenous voting rights. A guest producer admitted they were warned not to book guests who were too political, too sharp, too intense. Suddenly, Jasmine's moment wasn't isolated. It was part of a larger pattern unraveling in real time. Think pieces flooded the internet, not just about Ellen, but about an entire genre of performative progressivism where white liberalism wore kindness like a costume and called itself allyship while silencing the very people it claimed to uplift. The phrase, "nice white liberal," started trending. News anchors debated it. Writers unpacked it. Communities had long overdue conversations about who's allowed to lead and who's told to smile through being led. And in the center of the storm was Jasmine Crockett. Not as a trending topic, not as a viral clip, as a symbol, not of outrage but of reality. She hadn't attacked. She hadn't even retaliated. She'd revealed. And that kind of clarity? It doesn't go away quietly. College students began organizing panels around her speech. Grassroots campaigns quoted her line, "I wasn't dragged from Africa. I was built by America." It became more than defiance. It became doctrine. Ellen's team released another statement longer this time. They promised to reevaluate content, reflect, and learn. But the air had shifted. America wasn't waiting for apologies. It was listening to new voices. Voices like Jasmine's. Because this wasn't a clapback anymore. It was a reckoning. And reckoning has no studio audience. The offers came in like waves. Primetime interviews. Magazine covers. Streaming networks dangling documentary deals. Producers begged. Networks fought over time slots. Everyone wanted Jasmine Crockett in their couch, on their show, on their brand. She turned them all down. No interviews. No victory laps. No branded partnerships or podcast exclusives. Instead, her team posted a single statement. This isn't about virality. This is about visibility and truth. And then Jasmine disappeared from headlines. But not from the work. She wasn't interested in becoming a media darling. She was building something quieter, stronger. Weeks after the speech, she announced a new initiative, a national program on media literacy and political power for underrepresented communities. The rollout was small. No flashy campaign. Just local partnerships, school visits, digital guides, resources to help young people see through, spin, call out coded language, and speak with conviction without apology. Her mission was simple: teach people not just to consume media, but to challenge it, to understand when representation was real and when it was just packaging. Her name didn't trend anymore. And she didn't mind. She met with students in underfunded schools, held roundtables with Black women journalists, quietly lobbied to redirect federal grants toward digital education access. When asked why she wasn't capitalizing on the moment, Jasmine only shrugged. "I'm not here for 15 minutes. I'm here for what happens after." Legacy, not limelight. Substance over spotlight. That was the choice. And that choice, it didn't come with applause. It came with impact. Because while some chased attention, Jasmine chose to build awareness. And in doing so, she created something louder than any headline. A blueprint for showing up, speaking up, and never shrinking back. The crowd sat under a blue Texas sky, fanning programs against the slow heat. It was commencement season caps tight, gowns loose, futures wide open. The graduates from Prairie View A.M. University were restless with anticipation, half listening to formal speeches, checking the time, waiting for the moment they'd throw their tassels and erupt. And then Jasmine Crockett stepped up to the podium. No teleprompter, no script, just a slim notepad in one hand, and a reputation that had outgrown even the campus stage. The applause hit like thunder, half reverence, half recognition. Because this wasn't just a politician. This was someone who had taken on a machine and didn't flinch. This was someone who spoke the truth when it wasn't safe to do so, and still walked with grace. Jasmine looked out over the rows of caps and faces, young and eager, bold and becoming. She smiled, but it wasn't soft. It was certain. "When I was your age," she began, "I thought the loudest voice was the one people would hear first." She paused, let the breeze pass. "But I've learned something since then." She held the silence like a chord, then dropped the sentence that would follow every graduate home. "When the world hands you a microphone, make sure your voice carries not just noise, but weight." The crowd froze, then roared. Some students stood. Some cried. One graduate held her chest like the words had hit something she'd been holding too long. Professors nodded from the back. Parents leaned in to whisper, "That's it. That's the lesson." Jasmine didn't stay long after the speech. She didn't pose for headlines. She shook a few hands, gave a few hugs, and left the stage the same way she entered. It centered, focused, whole. But her words stayed. Printed in yearbooks. Hung on dorm room walls. Quoted in campaign speeches in high school classrooms. Not just a moment. A new measure. For how to speak. How to stand. How to respond to ignorance without imitating it. The story didn't end in applause. It carried forward in conversations, in classrooms, in anyone who ever asked, "What do I do with my voice?" And Jasmine had answered, "Make sure it carries. Make sure it matters. Make sure it's yours." This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.